Hello everyone, welcome to my Wushu class. My name is Vasco and I want to help you improve your Wushu. Today we'll be talking about some basic work regarding your stances. I'll give you the foundation for 3 basic stances: Mabu or horse stance, Kungfu or bow stance, and Pubu or drop stance. And I'll also give you some tips for when performing them in sequence. First of all, let me say that this is the base for the basic work in Wushu, also known as Jibengo. Now I'll be sharing more videos about Jibengo in the future, but for now you should just understand that the better your Jibengo, the better Wushu athlete you'll become. So whether you're just starting or trying to get to the next level, Jibengo is where you start your work. In Wushu, we have what we call the 5 basic stances: Mabu, Kungfu, Pubu, Shegu, and Chubu. Today we'll focus on the first 3, so let's take a closer look. In this position, you want your feet pointing forward, your weight perfectly divided for each leg, and your knees bent until your thighs are parallel to the floor. The distance between your feet should be such that your shins are upright against the floor. You also want to have your waist aligned as much as possible with your knees, but that will depend on your flexibility. In Kungfu, you want your front knee bent until you form a 90-degree angle between your thigh and your shin. Your weight is tilted forward, showing that typical offensive Wushu style compared to the karate style, like I explained in the first video about punches. And the back leg is straight. In Pubu, you drop completely to the bent leg with your bottom as close as possible to that heel. Remember to point your straight leg's foot forward. And keep your back in the same plane as your legs. Now that we have a small overview of the stances, let's practice them in sequence. This is Mabu to Mabu sequence. Notice the contrast in movements like I talked about in the previous video. My power point is the final position, so until then I'm relaxed. But then I focus my strength and I create the most contrast through breathing and head movement, all of which I explained in the last video. Apart from that, the most important tips for this sequence are to maintain your height throughout the movement, including the transition. And when transitioning, do it in a straight line. And for that, the first thing you do is get your back leg knee to point to where you want to go. If you want to make sure you're doing that, you can also make a mini pause when your feet are close together during the transition, like this. In this sequence, the previous tips still apply, so move in a direct line and keep your height throughout the movement. But there are a couple of more things to consider. The first is the position of your legs. When performing this sequence, you don't walk in a straight line, but rather in 2 parallel lines where the front leg is always a bit indented, so that when you turn to Kungfu, your feet are not on a straight line, which would compromise your balance. This is actually pretty easy. Just think of it as a small railroad tracks, and each leg stays in one rail and never leaves. The second tip is about the rotation of your hip to go into Kungfu. You should be able to fully fit your hip in the front leg. This is harder than it looks, but when you achieve that, you feel the movement making more sense. This is a rather more complex sequence, so I'll let you follow up slowly first. The thing to keep in mind is your arms move with your legs. There's not a movement of one without the other. Slowly, it'll become more natural. Try to keep your arms in a plane vertical to the floor. And find your power points. You can try different power points and see which makes more sense to you. In summary, we saw three basic stances today: Mabu, Kungfu, and Pubu. And after a brief explanation about each one, we talked about performing them in sequence. In the Mabu to Mabu sequence, I pointed the importance of keeping your body at the same height throughout the whole movement, and of moving in a straight line by turning your knee first. In the Mabu to Kungfu sequence, remember to keep your feet in the railroad tracks and feed your hip. In the final sequence, we trained a more complex sequence of Pubu, where you should keep in mind that legs and arms go together, and you move in a plane perpendicular to the ground. That's it for today, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to like and share, subscribe to get the notifications. As always, I have a lot of great stuff coming up, so stay tuned. 再见